The senator from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to have more lengthy comments to make on this topic a little bit later, but I did want to, first of all, thank the distinguished senator from Illinois for his comments, and certainly want to thank Senator Card, and I'll do so more fully in just a moment. But I would like to remind the body that, yes, we went through several steps along the way to getting to where we are today that created certainly consternation on both sides of the aisle. There were lots of things that occurred. A letter was referred to. There was an address to the Joint Congress. There's been numbers of things along the way that have caused people to concern themselves that maybe this debate would end up being something that was partisan and of low level. But I think what we've done is we've actually marshaled ourselves through that. And we ended up with the Iran Review Act in short terms that gives us the opportunity, as the distinguished senator mentioned, to actually review this. We've done that. We've had 12 hearings on this topic, extensive hearings in the Foreign Relations Committee. Many other committees have done the same. And what we ended up putting in place with 98 votes in the Senate, 98-1, we had one senator that was absent. We created a process where all senators could review this, could have the documents at their disposal, could go through it, to go through classified briefings, should understand and could understand fully what this agreement says, and then have the right to vote. And so certainly some things happened along the way that as I mentioned, created some consternation. But as a body, in the United States Senate fashion, in lieu of letting that divide us and letting that create a scenario where we wouldn't review it and not vote on it, we created a process where we would review it and vote on it. And it's my hope, and I know I've had a very nice conversation with the distinguished senator from Illinois, certainly multiple conversations with a distinguished senator from Maryland. I hope that over the process of this week, that is what continues. I know that's what all of us want to see happen. I do think the American people deserve to know where senators and House members stand on this serious piece of policy, foreign policy that is before us, and I want to thank everyone for their role in getting it here. As a matter of fact, I'll just move on, if I could, to what I had planned to say. I first want to thank Senator McConnell and Senator Reid for allowing this debate to take place this week without having a motion to proceed. I couldn't thank Senator Cardin more for being a colleague who really works to try to figure out a way for the Senate to play its appropriate role in foreign policy. It's been nothing but outstanding in dealing with him since he assumed this role. I want to thank him for the way he has conducted himself. And I'd like to remind people that without the Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act, there would be no role for Congress. One of the things that I think has confused a lot of American people, and there are a lot of people that would prefer this to have been a treaty. But the fact is that under our form of government, the president is able to decide whether he's going to submit an agreement as a treaty or as an executive agreement. An executive agreement stays in place during the duration of that president's tenure and can be altered by the next president. A treaty is binding on future presidents. And so this president, as we know, decided to go directly to the UN Security Council and, by the way, lift some congressionally mandated sanctions that we all helped put in place that actually brought Iran to the table. And so with the knowledge of that, Congress stepped in and passed this piece of legislation that now gives us the right to review what the president has negotiated and to prevent him from lifting those congressionally mandated sanctions should we decide that we disapprove of this deal. So this is a place where Congress came together and said, no, we want to play a role, even though a role is not contemplated under an executive agreement. But I know that this has been confusing to numbers of people, and I know that this was the only vehicle capable of winning a veto-proof majority to provide Congress with this chance, a chance for the American people to have us on their behalf review this agreement and then vote. As I mentioned, we've had more than a dozen hearings. I have spent a great deal of time, as has the ranking member, as has all of our committee members, the presiding officer the same, so many people here going through this agreement, and I oppose implementation of this deal. I oppose its implementation. You know, when the president first stated his goal of ending Iran's nuclear program, that was something that I think could have achieved tremendous bipartisan support in this body. As a matter of fact, onward, there were discussions of dismantling the program. And as we all know today, and I'm going to speak more fully on this tomorrow, rather than ending it, this agreement allows the industrialization of the program of the world's leading state sponsor of terror, and it does so with our approval. Now, that is a large step from where we began these negotiations. And had the president achieved the goal, I think what you'd have in this body is 100 senators standing up and supporting what he said he wished to do with these negotiations. But we've ended up with something that certainly is a far cry from that. Instead of having anytime, anywhere inspections, I think everyone understands that there's a managed inspection process. Certainly there are some issues relative to the IAEA that has given many members tremendous concern. And I think the thing that is one of the most troubling aspects of this is only after 9 months, the leverage right now where basically the world community has had its boot on a rogue nation's throat. And what's happened through the course of these negotiations is that in 9 months, the leverage shifts from these nations, our nation being one of those, having them in a position where we might negotiate something that ends their program. Instead, what happens is the leverage shifts to Iran. The leverage shifts to Iran. They're going to receive, as we know, billions of dollars. Most people think the number's around $100 billion. By the way, they've got a $406 billion gross domestic product. That's how much that's the size of their economy. We're going to release to them over the next 9 months about $100 billion, 25% of their economy in 9 months. The president has said, surely, others, some of this is going to be used to sponsor terrorism. We know that. Think about if we had 25% of our GDP given to us over the next 9 months. We have an $18 trillion GDP, $5 trillion given to us over the next 9 months. Certainly this is going to have an impact on what they are able to do. And what Iran is going to be able to say in 9 months when we push back on violations in the agreement, we push back on terrorism, we push back on human rights violations, they're going to be able to say, because most of the sanctions will be lifted at that moment, they'll have their money, their economy will be growing. What are they going to say? Well, look, if you push back, we think this is unfair. They're already making these statements in Iran. We'll just resume our nuclear program. So instead of us having leverage over them, they're going to have leverage over us. They're going to have leverage over us. And this is in the vacuum of having no Middle Eastern policy. I don't say this to be pejorative, but we know we have no policy in the Middle East to push back against Iran. We know that. And so this agreement is going to end up being our de facto policy, and everything's going to be measured by what will Iran do if we push back? What if we push back against the fact that they're giving Hamas rockets to fire into Israel? What if we push back against what Hezbollah is doing in Lebanon and what they're doing in Syria? What if we push back against what the IRGC, the arm of the supreme leader, what if we push back against what he's doing right now to protect Assad? I mean, they're the shock force to keep Assad in power right now. We know that right now in prisons in Syria, we know people are being tortured. We saw it firsthand. The ranking member and I went over to see what was happening at the Holocaust Museum presentation where Caesar, someone working for the Assad regime, took photographs. We know that as we stand here in these comfortable settings in the chamber of the United States Senate, people's genitals are being removed and tortured. And Iran is supporting that. We know that. So the fact that they're going to have some resources to do more of that, to do the same thing with the Houthis in Yemen, to support terrorists and people who are trying to disrupt the government of Bahrain. So look, the leverage shifts to them. All they can say if we push back against those activities, what they're going to be able to say is, well, look, we think you're being unfair. We're just going to resume our program. I don't understand. This is beyond me. I've had no one explain it to me. I know the senator from Illinois had the diplomats from the other countries come in. I have no idea why in this last meeting in Geneva we agreed to lift the conventional weapons ban after 5 years. What did that have to do with the nuclear file? And then we listed the ballistic missile technology embargo in 8 years. What was that about? And then, as you know, with some really weird language that's in the agreement, we immediately lifted the ban on ballistic missile testing. And I think everyone here, the people sitting in the audience, people watching, everyone knows that Iran has no practical need whatsoever for this program. None. Let me say that one more time. Here's a country with 19,000 centrifuges, 10,000 of them operating. They have an underground facility at Fordo. They've got a facility at ARAK, A-R-A-K, that produces plutonium. They've got all kinds of research and development. And by the way, this agreement approves further research and development of their centrifuge. As a matter of fact, it paves the way for them. It also times it out perfectly for them to be in a position to be at zero breakout time, which is exactly what the president said they would be at in 13 years. They can just agree to this agreement. They can just continue to implement this agreement and be in that position. But they have no practical need. None. Some people have said, well, you know, if they really want to pursue the technology of medical isotopes, maybe they could use 500 centrifuges. So think about this. We have a country with one nuclear reactor, a country that could buy the enriched uranium to provide the energy for that. They could buy it cheaply on the market. But instead, they've put their entire society through grinding sanctions that have harmed families. They've been doing that for years. For something that they have no practical need for, there's only one need, and we all know that, and that is because they want to be in the position to be a nuclear-armed country. So let me say one more time. Every senator here supported this process, except for one. The American people deserve to know where our elected officials and where we stand on this consequential agreement. I hope that people on both sides will cause this to be a sober debate. I know it'll be impassioned, and I know that people will certainly be speaking strongly about the pros and cons of this agreement. But I do hope at the end of the day, while I was gone, I'll digress, there were discussions about filibustering. Filibustering the right to vote on this Iran agreement. Apparently, I read about it in some magazines here that instead of this being about people expressing themselves relative to a policy that they felt was important to the country, all of a sudden it became about something else. I would just say to my colleagues, I don't know how we can be in a place where we've said to our constituents that we want to review and vote on this agreement, and then over some revisionist statement or thought, come up with a process that says, no, we're going to filibuster it. We really don't want people to vote. It's my hope that over the course of the next several days that cooler heads will prevail, that we, of course, will have, I believe, a very sober debate. I think that my friends on the other side of the aisle have seen what the leader just did to try to ensure that we keep the debate about approval or disapproval, in this case, disapproval of this particular deal. And I hope that very soon we'll all be able to express ourselves with a vote on the deal itself, whether we believe it is in our nation's interest. I do not, some do. Let's have that debate in a sober way.